Savannah in late August, where the humidity clings to skin like a second pulse and Spanish moss hangs from the oaks like the fingers of watching ghosts. Imani Thorne, 6 months pregnant and bone-tired from a day of client consultations, pulls into the gravel drive of her grandmother's restored cottage, the one place in the world that has always meant safety. Her keys are already in her hand when she notices it. The front door, painted haint blue to ward off spirits, sits 2 inches ajar. The evening chorus of cicadas seems to quiet. Her free hand drifts instinctively to the swell of her belly. She steps inside. The scent hits her first: sandalwood, tobacco leaf, and something cold beneath it, like the memory of winter in a place that has never known snow. Then she sees him. Park Seo-joon sits in her reading chair by the window, the one with the worn velvet arms where she'd planned to nurse her child. His posture is unhurried, regal. A black suit cuts sharp lines against his frame, and bold Korean characters crawl up the side of his neck like a warning label. He is exactly as she remembers from Jeju, except now there is no softness in his eyes, only calculation. 2 guards flank the doorway behind her. Through the lace curtains, she glimpses 3 black SUVs parked along the azalea hedge, engines idling. Her sanctuary has been turned into a checkpoint. Seo-joon's gaze drops to her belly, lingering, proprietary, then lifts to meet hers. When he speaks, the softness of his voice is somehow worse than if he had shouted. "You left Jeju without a word. You hid this from me for 6 months." He rises from her chair, slow and deliberate, every movement a reminder that he has never had to rush for anything in his life. "So now I am not asking." The room shrinks. "Marry me," he says, "or I take the baby." In a single breath, Imani's quiet southern life collapses into a high-stakes war against a man who commands an empire, and who has just declared her unborn child his most valuable asset. The battle is no longer about romance. It is about survival, autonomy, and whether a woman can outmaneuver a king on his own chessboard. Thank you for sticking around with me, and welcome back, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now back to the story. Imani's phone died first. She watched the screen flicker and go dark in her hand, the little spinning wheel of death appearing just as she tried to dial 911. Seo-joon hadn't moved from her reading chair, but his lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Your bank accounts were frozen 20 minutes ago," he said, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "Your credit cards, your business accounts, your grandmother's trust, all of it. The security company that monitors this cottage has been informed that you've relocated. Your clients received emails this morning explaining that Thorne Landscape Design is on indefinite hiatus." Imani's legs threatened to buckle. She gripped the doorframe, her knuckles blanching. "You can't do this." "I already have." He rose from the chair with the fluid grace of a predator who did not need to rush. The guards behind her didn't move, but she felt the air shift, the silent understanding that if she ran, she wouldn't make it past the azaleas. 6 months ago, Seo-joon said, crossing the worn hardwood floors of her grandmother's cottage, "You left my bed in Jeju Island. You left a note on hotel stationery thanking me for a lovely time. You vanished like I was a vacation you'd finished. You didn't tell me who you were." Imani's voice came out stronger than she felt. "You said you were in shipping." "I am in shipping." He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could smell that same winter-cold scent beneath his cologne. "Among other things. But you didn't leave because of what I do, Imani. You left because of what you felt. And you've been hiding ever since." Her hand pressed against her belly, a protective instinct she couldn't suppress. His eyes tracked the movement, and something dangerous flickered in their depths. That child, he said quietly, is the heir to the Park Syndicate, the first of the next generation. Do you understand what that means? It means you're insane if you think I'm handing my baby over to a crime family. Our baby. The correction was soft. Absolutely. And you misunderstand me. I'm not asking for custody. I'm asking for you. Both of you. Together. Under my protection. Your protection. Imani laughed, though there was no humor in it. You just dismantled my entire life in 20 minutes. Because you would have run again. He stepped closer, and she hated herself for not stepping back. You would have taken our child and disappeared into some small town where I couldn't reach you. You would have raised my daughter calling another man daddy, while I spent years hunting for ghosts. Daughter. The word slipped out before she could stop it. How do you? I know everything, Imani. Your last ultrasound. Your blood pressure readings. The name of the midwife you've been interviewing. His voice dropped, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something beneath the ice. I know you've been scared and alone for 6 months, and I know that's my fault. But I'm here now. Here to threaten me. Here to claim what's mine. He reached out, and she flinched, but his hand only came to rest against her jaw, gentle in a way that made her chest ache. You're mine, Imani. Which means you're untouchable. No one in this world will ever hurt you or our child. Not as long as I'm breathing. And if I say no. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Then my legal team will file for emergency custody based on your unstable living situation and frozen assets. The case will be heard in a Korean court, where the Park family has significant influence. You'll spend the next year fighting a battle you cannot win, and by the end of it, you'll have lost everything anyway, including the right to hold your daughter when she's born. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're a monster. Yes. He didn't flinch. Didn't apologize. But I'm your monster now. And I protect what belongs to me. 3 hours later, Imani sat in a leather seat aboard a private jet, watching the Savannah coastline disappear beneath the clouds. Her suitcase had been packed by strangers. Her cottage had been locked by guards. Everything she'd built in the 3 years since leaving New York, her business, her peace, her carefully constructed independence, had been dismantled like a house of cards. Seo Jun sat across from her, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching her with those unreadable eyes. I'm not going to forgive you for this, she said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. He took a slow sip. I'm asking for a chance. By the time we land in Seoul, you'll have a new phone, new accounts, and full access to resources you've never imagined. You'll want for nothing. Except my freedom. Freedom is an illusion. He set the glass down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, bringing himself closer to her eye level. You were never free, Imani. You were just alone. There's a difference. The jet climbed higher, leaving American soil behind. Imani turned to the window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass, and let her hand rest on the curve of her belly where her daughter kicked. Strong, insistent, already a fighter. I'm going to find a way out of this, she whispered, low enough that he might not hear. But he did. No, Seo Jun replied, something almost like warmth creeping into his voice. You're going to find a way through. And I'll be beside you every step. She didn't answer. Didn't look at him. But somewhere beneath the terror and the rage, a small, traitorous part of her remembered Jeju. The way he'd laughed at her terrible Korean, the way he'd memorized her tea order after a single morning, and the way he'd looked at her like she was the only solid thing in a world made of smoke. That man was still in there somewhere. She was sure of it. She just didn't know if finding him would save her, or destroy her completely. Seoul announced itself through the airplane window like a blade catching light. Glass towers piercing low-hanging clouds, the Han River cutting silver through the urban sprawl. Imani had never seen a city that looked so precisely engineered, so ruthlessly modern. It made Savannah's soft edges feel like a fever dream. The private jet landed at an airstrip she was certain didn't appear on any public map. 3 black SUVs waited on the tarmac, and Seo Jun guided her into the middle vehicle with a hand on the small of her back. Proprietary but gentle, a contradiction she was learning to associate with everything about him. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind. The urban density gave way to forested hills, then to a winding private road marked by cameras and guards who bowed as the convoy passed. When the trees finally parted, Imani stopped breathing. The Hanamung estate sprawled across the mountainside like something out of a historical drama. Traditional Korean architecture reimagined on a scale meant to intimidate. Curved tile roofs swept toward the sky in elegant peaks. Stone walls wrapped around courtyards she couldn't see into. Modern glass additions jutted from ancient wooden frames, as if the past and present had been forced into an uneasy marriage. "This is your family home?" she asked. "This is where the chairman lives." Seo Jun's voice was flat. "My father built it to remind everyone who enters that the Park family answers to no one." "And where is your father now?" "Dead. 3 years. He didn't elaborate. Didn't need to." The way his jaw tightened told her everything about how that death had occurred. The SUV stopped before a massive wooden gate, and servants appeared to open doors, collect luggage, and bow in perfect synchronization. Imani felt like she'd stepped into a performance where everyone knew their role except her. Seo Jun helped her out of the car, his hand finding hers. "Stay close to me." "Why? Are the flower arrangements dangerous?" His lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. "The flowers are fine. It's the woman who arranged them you need to worry about." Before Imani could ask what that meant, the inner courtyard doors swept open, and a woman emerged. She was perhaps 60, though her face had the preserved stillness of someone who had long ago decided that aging was for lesser people. Her hanbok was pearl gray, immaculately draped, with embroidery so fine it looked like frost on silk. Her hair was pulled back in a severe knot, and her eyes, the same dark, calculating eyes Seo Jun had inherited, fixed on Imani like a surgeon assessing where to make the first incision. "So." The woman's voice was cool and accented, each syllable precisely weighted. "This is the American mother." Seo Jun's grip on Imani's hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "This is Imani Thorne, the mother of your grandchild." Park Ji-hee descended the stone steps with the grace of someone who had never rushed in her life. She stopped 5 feet from Imani, her gaze dropping to the swell of her belly, then lifting slowly, taking in Imani's travel-wrinkled dress, her natural hair, and her defiant posture. "You are not what I expected," Ji-hee said finally. "I could say the same." Imani refused to look away. "Your son neglected to mention he was Mafia royalty when we met." Something flickered across Ji-hee's face, surprise perhaps at being addressed so directly. Then her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She has a spine. Good. She'll need it." Ji-hee turned to her son. "The East Wing has been prepared. The doctor will examine her within the hour." "And Seo Jun," she paused, her voice sharpening. "We will speak privately. Tonight. After dinner. Now." The single word cracked through the courtyard like a whip. Imani watched the power dynamic shift and watched Seo Jun's jaw clench with something that looked almost like childhood fear before he smoothed it away. "Imani," he said, his voice softening as he turned to her, "one of the attendants will show you to your rooms. Rest. I'll come find you." "And if I want to explore?" Ji-hee answered before her son could. "The East Wing and the gardens. Nowhere else." There are parts of this house that would be unsuitable for a woman in your condition. The threat was wrapped in silk, but it was a threat nonetheless. Imani recognized it, cataloged it, and filed it away with all the other danger signs she'd been collecting since Seo Jun appeared in her living room. Understood, she said flatly. Seo Jun hesitated, then leaned close, his lips brushing her ear. Don't let her see you bleed. Then he was gone, disappearing into the main house with his mother, and Imani was left standing in a courtyard that suddenly felt less like an estate and more like an arena. The attendant who appeared at her elbow was young, pretty, and entirely silent. She led Imani through winding corridors, past rooms glimpsed through sliding doors, calligraphy scrolls, antique weapons mounted on walls, and photographs of men in suits that somehow all shared the same predatory stillness. The East Wing was beautiful. Imani hated it immediately. Her rooms turned out to be an entire apartment, a bedroom with a bed large enough for 6, a private bathroom with a soaking tub carved from stone, and a sitting room with windows overlooking a bamboo grove. Everything was immaculate. Everything was tasteful. Everything felt like a very elegant cell. She sank onto the bed, one hand pressed to her belly. Her daughter kicked. Once, twice, a small protest against the chaos. I know, baby girl, Imani whispered. I know. But we're going to figure this out. We're going to survive this. Somewhere in the main house, she heard raised voices, Jihee's sharp tones cutting through walls that were thinner than they appeared. She couldn't make out the words, but she didn't need to. She knew she was the subject. The foreign woman. The American. The outsider who had dared to carry the park air without permission. Imani closed her eyes and thought of Savannah. The heat, the moss, the cottage that had been her grandmother's and her mother's before it was hers. She thought of the life she'd built from nothing after leaving New York, after leaving Marcus, after swearing she would never again let a powerful man dictate her worth. And now here she was. Pregnant. Trapped. Already in love with a monster who remembered how she took her tea. God help her. 3 days passed before Jihee struck. Imani had been lulled into something approaching routine. Morning tea delivered by silent attendants, afternoon walks through the meticulously designed gardens, and evenings spent reading in her gilded cage while Seo Jun attended to what he vaguely called family business. He came to her each night, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit in the chair by her window and watch her like she might disappear if he blinked. They hadn't touched since the jet. Having done no more than exchange careful words across the distance, he seemed determined to maintain it until she chose him. It was, Imani realized, the most patient thing she'd ever seen him do, and somehow the most unsettling. On the 4th morning, the summons came. A servant appeared with a folded note on a lacquer tray. The handwriting was elegant, the message simple. Tea in the chrysanthemum room. 10 a.m. Do not be late. Imani dressed carefully, in one of the designer maternity dresses that had appeared in her closet overnight, silk the color of crushed berries. If Jihee wanted a battle, she would meet her in armor. The chrysanthemum room was in the West Wing, an area Imani had been forbidden to enter. She walked through corridors she'd never seen, past guards who watched but didn't stop her. The room itself was a small marvel. Screens painted with autumn flowers and a low table set with porcelain so thin light passed through it. Jihee sat at the head of the table, dressed in white, her hands folded in her lap like a queen awaiting tribute. Sit. She didn't look up as Imani entered. Imani sat. The cushion was harder than it looked, designed, she suspected, to keep guests uncomfortable. You have survived 3 days without attempting to escape. Jihee finally raised her eyes. I admit, I thought you'd try by now. I'm 6 months pregnant, and your son has frozen my entire life. Where exactly would I go? Resourceful women find ways. Jihee lifted a cup and sipped delicately. I did once. When Seo Jun's father first brought me to this house, I was 17. I ran 3 times before I understood. Understood what? That running only matters if you have somewhere to run to. Ji-hee set the cup down with a click. You don't, Miss Thorne. Every ally you might have cultivated, every resource you might have accessed. My son has already closed those doors. He is thorough. He learned that from me. Imani's hands curled in her lap. What do you want? To understand. Ji-hee tilted her head, studying Imani like a specimen. What is it about you that has driven my son to madness? You are beautiful, yes. Intelligent, clearly. But Seo Jun has had beautiful, intelligent women before. He discarded them like tissues. Yet you. Her eyes narrowed. You, he crossed oceans for. You, he risked exposing our operations for. Is willing to marry despite the chaos it will cause within the syndicate. Maybe he loves me. Ji-hee laughed, a cold musical sound. Love. You Americans and your obsession with love. Love is a fever, Miss Thorne. It burns hot and then it burns out. What my son feels for you is something far more dangerous. It is an obsession. Fixation. He has built you into something sacred in his mind, and when you inevitably fail to match that image, he will be destroyed. And you think I should leave? For his sake. I think you should understand what you're walking into. Ji-hee leaned forward, her perfume, jasmine cold and sharp, cutting through the air. The Park Syndicate controls shipping routes through 6 countries. We have politicians in our pockets and judges on our payroll. We have survived wars, coups, and government purges. We have done this by being ruthless, by cutting away anything that makes us weak. Her voice dropped. You make my son weak, Miss Thorne. When he looks at you, he does not see a woman. He sees a future he has never allowed himself to want. And that wanting will consume him. It will consume you both until there is nothing left but ash and blood. Imani's throat tightened, but she refused to flinch. You don't know me. You don't know what I can survive. I know enough. Ji-hee rose, her hanbok rustling like dry leaves. I know you left him without a word. I know you hid his child for 6 months. I know that when he found you, you fought him instead of falling at his feet. She paused at the door, her back to Imani. Perhaps you are stronger than I thought. Or perhaps you are simply too stubborn to see the knife until it's buried in your heart. She glanced back, her expression unreadable. The wedding will be in 2 days. Seo Jun insisted. I would tell you to run, Miss Thorne, but we both know it's already too late for that. You loved him the moment you met him. That's why you ran in the first place. The door slid closed behind her, and Imani was left alone in the chrysanthemum room, surrounded by painted flowers that suddenly looked less like decorations and more like warnings. She pressed her hand to her belly and felt her daughter shift. Restless, agitated, as if she could sense her mother's racing heart. I know, Imani whispered. I know. But she's wrong about one thing. She stood, her legs steadier than they had any right to be. I didn't run because I loved him. I ran because I knew if I stayed, I'd never want to leave. The difference, she was beginning to realize, might not matter at all. Sleep wouldn't come. Imani lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling where moonlight painted shifting patterns through the bamboo screens. The compound was silent, that particular wealthy silence that cost money to maintain, where even the night insects seemed too well-bred to make noise. Her daughter kicked, a sharp jab beneath her ribs that felt like a reprimand. I know. I should be resting. Imani rolled onto her side, one hand curved around her belly. But your father is a crime lord, your grandmother wants me dead or gone, and we're getting married in 2 days. Forgive me if I'm a little too wired for sleep." The knock came so softly she almost missed it. She sat up, heart hammering. The door slid open before she could speak, and Seo-jun stepped inside, still dressed in the black suit he'd worn to whatever business had kept him away all day, his tie loosened, his hair falling across his forehead in a way that made him look almost human. "You're awake," he said. "Your mother threatened me today. It put a damper on my relaxation routine." He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, something tired in the set of his shoulders. "She told me. I've spoken with her." "Oh, good. I'm sure that fixed everything. It won't happen again." "Seo-jun." Imani swung her legs over the side of the bed, facing him across the moonlit room. "Your mother just spent an hour explaining in exquisite detail how my presence is going to destroy you. She wasn't threatening me. She was warning me. There's a difference." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pushed off from the door and crossed the room, sinking into the chair by her window, the same position he'd taken every night, close enough to touch but never touching. "My mother," he said slowly, "has watched 3 women she loved die in this world. Her sister, her best friend, her own mother. She believes that caring for anyone makes you a target, and she's not wrong. But she doesn't understand." He stopped, jaw tightening. "Doesn't understand what?" "That I was already destroyed." His voice dropped, rough at the edges. "Long before I met you. I just didn't know it until you left." Imani's breath caught. "Seo-jun." 6 months. He wasn't looking at her now. His gaze was fixed on the bamboo grove outside, his profile sharp in the silver light. "Do you know what I did for 6 months, Imani? I tracked you. Not to find you. I knew where you were within 48 hours. I tracked you to make sure you were safe. I had men stationed in Savannah who reported to me every single day. When you had a scare at 20 weeks and went to the hospital, I was on a plane before you'd even been discharged. I sat in a parking lot across from the medical center for 6 hours, waiting to hear that you were okay." Her heart was doing something painful, cracking and swelling at the same time. "Why didn't you come to me then?" "Because I knew if I did, I wouldn't give you a choice." He finally turned to look at her, and his eyes were raw in a way she'd never seen. "I wanted to. God, I wanted to drag you onto a plane that night and bring you here and never let you out of my sight again. But I kept telling myself I could be patient. I could wait until the baby was born, until you were stable, until you might actually listen to me." "What changed?" "Young." The name came out sharp, bitter. "My brother. He found out about you. About the baby. He started making moves, talking to people in the syndicate about the American liability, who was carrying the heir. I realized that if I didn't act, someone else would. And they wouldn't be as gentle as I am." Imani laughed despite herself, a ragged, exhausted sound. "You call this gentle? You froze my bank accounts. You kidnapped me. I gave you a choice. A choice between marriage and losing my child is not a choice." "No," he agreed quietly. "But it was the best I could offer. The alternative was watching you disappear into witness protection, or seeing your face in a police report, or—" His voice broke. He looked away. "I couldn't. I'm not strong enough to lose you again." She should hate him. Everything he'd done, everything he'd taken from her, should make hatred easy. But Imani had never been good at being easy. She stood from the bed and crossed the room to stand before him. He looked up at her, surprise flickering across his features, and she saw the man beneath the monster, the man who had traced constellations across her bare shoulder on a beach in Jeju, who had whispered poetry in Korean while she pretended to sleep. "You should have told me who you were," she said softly. "Would you have stayed if I had?" "No." Honest. Raw. I would have run faster. But at least I would have known what I was running from. And now that you know. His hand came up, hovering just above her hip, not quite touching. Now that you've seen the estate and met my mother and understand exactly what kind of man you're chained to, do you still want to run? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with everything they'd never said. Imani reached out and took his hand, pressed it against the curve of her belly, where their daughter was doing somersaults at 2 a.m. I stopped running the moment I saw you in my living room, she admitted. I just didn't want to admit it. His breath shuddered out of him. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against her stomach, and for a long moment, he simply stayed there. This man who commanded armies, brought to his knees by the flutter of a child he hadn't yet met. I won't fail you, he said against her skin. I swear it. Whatever comes, whatever my mother does, whatever Jung tries, I will keep you safe. Both of you. I know. And the terrifying thing was, she believed him. She ran her fingers through his hair, and he made a sound low in his throat, something broken and grateful and desperately human. They stayed like that until the moon set and the first gray light of dawn crept through the bamboo. They didn't kiss. Didn't do more than hold each other in the darkness. But something shifted between them. Some wall that Imani had built came crumbling down, and she knew, with the same certainty she'd known the moment she met him, that there was no going back now. For better or worse, she was his. And God help anyone who tried to take her away. The day before her wedding, Imani met the snake. She was in the East Garden, sitting on a stone bench beneath a canopy of maples that were just beginning to blush red at their edges. The doctor had visited that morning, pronouncing both mother and baby healthy, and Seo Jun had left for some final arrangement that required his personal attention. For the first time since arriving in Korea, Imani felt something approaching peace. It lasted exactly 12 minutes. You must be the American. The voice came from behind her. Smooth, amused, with an accent less refined than Seo Jun's. Imani turned to find a man leaning against a garden pillar, his arms crossed, his posture deliberately casual. He looked like Seo Jun the way a counterfeit looks like currency. The same dark hair, the same sharp jaw, but the eyes were different. Colder. Hungrier. You must be the brother, she replied. Jung, right? Seo Jun mentioned you. Did he? Jung pushed off from the pillar and approached, moving with the loose-limbed confidence of someone who had never faced a consequence in his life. What did he say? That I'm the disappointing second son? The one who couldn't be trusted with the family legacy. He said you were dangerous. Imani kept her voice steady. He said I should never be alone with you. Jung laughed, a sound like glass breaking. And yet here we are, all alone in the garden. He sat on the opposite end of her bench, uninvited, and pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. I have a gift for you, Imani Thorne. She didn't take it. I'm not interested in gifts from strangers. We're not strangers. We're going to be family. His smile showed too many teeth. Or at least we would be if this wedding actually happens. But I'm here to offer you an alternative. He set the envelope on the bench between them. It was thick. Heavy. 100,000 American dollars, Jung said. Cash. Untraceable. There's a car waiting outside the East Gate and a pilot who owes me a favor at a private airstrip an hour from here. You could be back in Savannah by tomorrow morning. Back to your little cottage, your little business, your little life. Imani stared at the envelope, then at him. Why? Because my brother is weak. The amusement drained from Jung's face, replaced by something colder. He always has been. He hides it well, the tailored suits, the quiet violence, the reputation for ruthlessness. But underneath, Seo Jun is soft. Our father saw it. Our mother sees it. And now you found the crack and wedged yourself inside. You make it sound like I seduced him. Didn't you? Jung tilted his head. A summer fling with a foreigner. A convenient pregnancy. A man so obsessed he risks the entire syndicate's stability to claim you. It's almost impressive the damage you've done. I didn't do anything except exist. Exactly. Jung leaned closer, and his voice dropped to a whisper. You exist. That's the problem. As long as you're here, Seo Jun is distracted. Compromised. Every decision he makes is filtered through his obsession with you and that child. The vultures in the syndicate smell blood. They're circling. And when they finally strike, it won't just be Seo Jun who falls. It will be everything our family has built for 3 generations. Imani's hand drifted to her belly. And you think money will make me disappear? That I'll just abandon the father of my child because his brother handed me an envelope? I think you're smarter than you pretend to be. Jung stood, straightening his jacket. I think you know this world will eat you alive. And I think deep down you're terrified that you'll let it. He glanced down at the envelope one last time. The offer stands until midnight. After that, the car leaves, and you become a permanent problem. Permanent problems in this family tend to have very short lifespans. He walked away without looking back, disappearing into the maze of hedges that separated the gardens from the main house. Imani sat frozen on the bench, the envelope burning a hole in her peripheral vision. $100,000. A clean escape. A life where she wouldn't have to meet Jihee's cold eyes across the breakfast table or wonder if every servant was a spy or sleep next to a man whose hands had done things she couldn't imagine. She picked up the envelope, felt the weight of it, and then, very deliberately, she walked to the ornamental pond at the garden's edge and dropped it in the water. The envelope sank slowly, cash fanning out like pale green weeds, ruined beyond salvage. Imani watched until it disappeared beneath the lily pads. I hope you were watching, she said to the empty garden, knowing the cameras were everywhere, knowing Jung would hear about this within the hour. Because that's my answer. She turned and walked back toward the east wing, her head high, her heart pounding. Tonight, she would tell Seo Jun about his brother's visit. Tomorrow she would marry a monster. And God help anyone who tried to stop her. She found him in his study, surrounded by men in dark suits who fell silent the moment she entered. Seo Jun looked up from a spread of documents, his expression shifting from sharp focus to something softer when he saw her. Leave us, he said. The men filed out without a word. The door closed behind them, and suddenly they were alone. Imani in her simple dress, still damp at the hem from kneeling beside the pond, and Seo Jun in his shirt sleeves, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Your brother came to visit me, she said. He went very still. What did he do? He offered me $100,000 to disappear. Imani crossed the room, stopping on the opposite side of his desk. He said I make you weak. That my presence is going to destroy the syndicate. That if I stayed, I'd become a permanent problem with a short lifespan. Seo Jun's hands curled into fists on the desk. I'll kill him. No. Her voice was firm, surprising herself. You won't. He threatened you. He told me the truth. She came around the desk and he turned in his chair to face her, his expression a war zone of rage and fear. He told me what everyone in this house thinks but won't say to your face. That you're compromised. That I'm a liability. That this marriage is going to start a civil war within your organization. I don't care. I know you don't. That's the problem. Imani reached out and took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. You would burn everything down for me. Your legacy, your power, your family's empire. All of it. And you don't even see how terrifying that is." "It's not terrifying," he said roughly. "It's the truth. You and our daughter are worth more than any of it. Seo Jun." Her voice cracked. "I'm nobody. I'm a landscape architect from Savannah whose biggest claim to fame is designing a meditation garden for a yoga studio. I don't belong in this world. You belong wherever I am." "That's not," she started to pull away, but his hands came up to cover hers, holding her in place. "Listen to me." His voice was low and intense. "I have spent 32 years being exactly what this family needed. The perfect heir. The cold strategist. The man who never blinked, never flinched, and never wanted anything for himself. And then I met you on that beach in Jeju and you looked at me like I was just a man. Not a name. Not a title. Just a person worth talking to." His thumbs traced circles against her wrists. "That's when I knew I was ruined. Because once you've been seen, really seen, you can never go back to being invisible. And I refuse to spend the rest of my life pretending I don't need you just because it's politically convenient." Tears slipped down Imani's cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them away. "I should hate you," she whispered. "For everything you've done. For taking my choices away." "Do you?" She looked at him. This man who had crossed oceans and dismantled her life and threatened her with courts and lawyers, all because he couldn't bear to lose her. This man who remembered her tea and sat by her window at night and pressed his forehead to her belly like she was a temple. "No," she admitted. "God help me, I don't. I think I'm stupid enough to love you." Something shattered in his expression. Something rebuilt. He stood, pulling her against him, and his mouth found hers in a kiss that tasted like surrender. Both of theirs, given freely, held between them like a promise. "Tomorrow," he said against her lips. "You'll be my wife." "Tomorrow," she agreed. "You'll be my problem." He laughed, a real laugh rusty from disuse, and held her tighter. Outside, the sun was setting over the Hanamung estate, painting the sky in shades of fire. Somewhere in the main house, Jung was plotting. Jihi was scheming. The syndicate was sharpening its knives. But in that study, in that moment, there was only this. Two people choosing each other against all reason, all logic, and all self-preservation. It was madness. It was love. And tomorrow it would be war. The wedding was beautiful. That was what Imani would remember later. How beautiful everything was, right up until the moment it all went to hell. The ceremony was held in the main pavilion, an open-air structure overlooking a lotus pond that reflected the mountains in its mirror-still surface. Lanterns hung from every beam, casting warm light across silk banners embroidered with the Park family crest. 200 guests sat in silent rows, their faces a mix of loyalty, curiosity, and barely concealed hostility. Imani recognized maybe 3 of them. She wore a modified hanbok, white and crimson, designed to accommodate her belly, with gold threads stitched into patterns that meant things she didn't understand. Her hair was swept up with jade pins that had belonged to Seo Jun's grandmother. She looked, according to the mirror, like someone playing a role in a drama she hadn't rehearsed. Seo Jun waited at the altar, dressed in traditional black, his posture military straight. When she began her walk down the aisle, his eyes never left hers. She saw his throat move as he swallowed. The ceremony was in Korean, translated by a patient interpreter who whispered in Imani's ear. There were bows, offerings of wine, symbolic foods she didn't recognize. Through it all, Seo Jun held her hand like he was afraid she might float away. They were 3 minutes from the final vows when the first SUV crashed through the garden gate. The sound was apocalyptic. Metal screaming against metal, the ancient wooden gate splintering like kindling. Guests screamed. Guards drew weapons. And then more vehicles poured through the gap, doors flying open, men in black tactical gear spilling out with guns raised. Down! Seo-jun threw himself over Imani, shielding her with his body as the first shots rang out. They hit the ground hard, her belly pressed against the wooden platform, his weight crushing the air from her lungs. Chaos erupted. The carefully orchestrated ceremony dissolved into a battlefield. Gunfire, shouting, and the wet sounds of bodies falling. Imani couldn't see anything past Seo-jun's shoulder, but she could hear everything. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice barely audible over the noise. "Don't move." "What's happening?" "Coup." The word was clipped, furious. "Young." He moved faster than I expected. More shots. Someone screamed nearby. Seo-jun raised himself slightly, assessing, and then his hands were grabbing Imani, dragging her backward. "Seo-jun." She fought, but the hands were too strong, too many. She caught a glimpse of his face, rage, terror, something that looked like despair, and then she was being pulled through a gap in the pavilion's floor, down into darkness. She emerged in the garden maze. The hands released her, and she stumbled, catching herself against a hedge. When she turned, she found herself face to face with a gun. Jung held it casually, like an extension of his arm. His handsome face twisted into something ugly. "Hello, sister-in-law," he said. "I told you the offer expired at midnight." "You're insane." Imani's voice shook. "The entire syndicate is up there. Witnesses. Allies. You can't kill them all." "I don't need to kill them all. Just the ones who matter." He gestured with the gun, directing her deeper into the maze. "My brother. His loyalists. And, of course, you. Seo-jun will find you. He'll. Seo-jun is a little busy right now." Jung's smile was razor-thin. "My men have orders to keep him occupied. By the time he realizes where you've gone, it'll be far too late." They moved through the maze, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Imani's mind raced, cataloging options. She was 6 months pregnant, unarmed, and wearing a hanbok that restricted her movement. Jung had a gun, training, and the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. But she had something he didn't. She had 3 years of self-defense classes, taken after leaving Marcus, and practiced until her body moved without thinking. She had desperation. And she had a very good reason to stay alive. They reached a dead end, a small clearing with a stone bench and a single cherry tree, its blossoms scattered across the ground like pink snow. "This is where it ends," Jung said, raising the gun. "I'll tell Seo-jun you ran. That my men found you too late. He'll grieve, but he'll survive. And eventually, he'll understand that I did what was necessary." Imani took a slow breath, centered her weight, remembered every lesson. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. "What's that?" "This is where it ends." She moved. Jung expected her to run. They always ran. Instead, Imani stepped inside his reach. The gun discharged, a deafening crack that sent birds screaming from the cherry tree. But she was already moving, her body twisting in the way her instructor had drilled into her 1,000 times. Inside the arm. Control the weapon. Use their momentum against them. Her elbow connected with Jung's wrist. The gun went flying. Before he could recover, her knee came up, not into his groin, too obvious, he'd expect that, but into the soft tissue just above his hip. He doubled over with a grunt of surprise. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. 3 years of training took over. Her body moving through sequences she'd never expected to use outside the gym. Palm strike to the nose. Blood sprayed across her white hanbok. Heel stomp to the instep. Jung howled. And then, the final move, the one her instructor had called the closer. A precise strike to the cluster of nerves at the base of his neck. Jung dropped. He wasn't dead. Wasn't even unconscious, just stunned, his body refusing to cooperate. His eyes wide with disbelief as he stared up at the pregnant woman who had just dismantled him in 30 seconds. Imani stood over him, breathing hard, her hands shaking. "I'm not a liability," she said. "I'm not weak. And I'm not afraid of you." She picked up the gun, held it with hands that trembled only slightly. "Imani." The voice came from the maze entrance. She spun, weapon raised, and found Seo-jun standing there, bloody, his suit torn, his eyes wild with something that looked like terror until they landed on her. His gaze swept over the scene. His brother is on the ground, the gun in her hands, the blood on her dress. "Are you hurt?" His voice cracked. "No." She lowered the weapon. He missed. Seo-jun crossed the clearing in 3 strides and pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like he could absorb her into his body. She felt him shaking, this man who commanded armies, trembling like a leaf. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered into her hair. "I thought when I couldn't find you, I thought. I'm okay. We're okay." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "But your brother. We'll pay for this." Seo-jun's expression hardened as he looked down at Jung, who was struggling to rise. He released Imani and moved toward his brother, his hand reaching for something at his belt. A knife. Short, curved, and wickedly sharp. "Seo-jun." Imani caught his arm. "Don't. He tried to kill you. To kill our daughter." "I know. And he failed." She stepped between him and Jung, her hands on his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palms. "If you kill him now, it won't be justice. It'll be revenge. And revenge will haunt you. It'll haunt our daughter. Is that the legacy you want to leave her? He doesn't deserve mercy." "No. He doesn't." She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her instead of his brother. "But you deserve to be more than a murderer. You deserve to be the kind of man our daughter can be proud of. Don't let him take that from you." For a long, terrible moment, she thought he would do it anyway. His body vibrated with rage, with 6 months of fear and a lifetime of violence, with every instinct that had been trained into him since childhood. Then, slowly, the knife lowered. "Lock him up," Seo-jun said to the guards who had finally caught up, his voice flat. "Solitary. No visitors. He'll face trial before the syndicate elders." The guards moved forward, dragging Jung away. He was still too stunned to resist, though his eyes burned with hatred as they pulled him past. "This isn't over," he spat. "Yes," Imani said quietly. "It is." When he was gone, Seo-jun sagged against her, his forehead dropping to her shoulder. She held him up, this man who held up empires, and let him fall apart in her arms. "It's over," she murmured. "It's over. We're safe. You saved yourself." His voice was muffled against her neck. "I was coming to rescue you, and you saved yourself. I had good motivation." She smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Someone once told me I was untouchable." He laughed, a broken, exhausted sound, and held her tighter. Above them, the cherry blossoms drifted down like pink snow, covering the blood on the ground, softening the edges of violence. Tomorrow there would be consequences, trials, restructuring, a world to rebuild. But tonight, there was only this: 2 people who had chosen each other, standing together in the aftermath, unbroken. The baby came 3 weeks early. The stress of the coup, the doctors said. The trauma of violence, even witnessed from a distance. Imani's body had decided that the safest place for her daughter was outside, in a world that was finally, tentatively, at peace. They rushed her to the private medical wing of the Hanemung estate, a facility that rivaled any hospital in Seoul. Seo-jun never left her side, his hand gripping hers through every contraction, his face pale beneath his composure. "You're doing beautifully," the doctor said, a woman with kind eyes and steady hands. "Just a little more." "I hate you," Imani gasped at Seo-jun. "I hate you and your entire family and this country and—" "I know," he said, pressing a kiss to her sweaty forehead. "I love you too." The labor stretched for hours. 8, then 10, then 12. Somewhere around the 14th hour, something went wrong. Imani saw it in the sudden tension on the doctor's face, heard it in the urgent Korean exchange between the medical staff, felt it in the way Seo-jun's grip on her hand tightened to the point of pain. "What's happening?" she demanded. "What's wrong?" "The baby is in distress." The doctor's voice was carefully calm. "We need to perform an emergency cesarean. But there are complications with your blood pressure. We may need to make decisions." "What kind of decisions?" The doctor looked at Seo-jun. "If it comes to a choice, her." Seo-jun didn't hesitate, didn't blink. "You save her. No matter what." Seo-jun. Imani's heart cracked. "The baby. We'll have a father who will move heaven and earth for her." His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "But only if she has a mother to show her how to be brave. You are not leaving me, Imani. I won't allow it. You can't just—" "I can." He leaned down, his forehead touching hers. "I love our daughter. I love her more than I knew I could love anything. But I loved you first. And if this world expects me to choose between you, then I choose you. I will always choose you." The medical team was moving around them, prepping for surgery and shouting instructions. But for one frozen moment, there were only the two of them, this impossible man and the woman who had somehow tamed him. "I'm not going anywhere," Imani whispered. "I promised you, remember? I'm staying." "Then fight." He kissed her. Hard, desperate, brief. "Fight as you fought in that maze. Fight for both of us." They wheeled her away then, through swinging doors into a white room full of machines and masked faces. Seo-jun was left behind, his hand empty, his eyes following her until the doors closed between them. The next 45 minutes were the longest of his life. He paced. He prayed, to gods he didn't believe in, to ancestors he'd never honored, to anyone or anything that might be listening. He made promises he knew he couldn't keep and threats he absolutely could. And then, finally, a sound. A cry. Small, fierce, and utterly furious at being forced into the world. The doors opened, and a nurse emerged, a small bundle in her arms. "Mr. Park." She was smiling. "Would you like to meet your daughter?" He took the baby like she was made of glass, this tiny creature with a shock of black hair and skin the color of honey, her face scrunched in newborn indignation. She was perfect. She was impossible. She was the best thing he had ever created. And Imani. His voice broke on her name. Resting. The surgery was successful. She lost some blood, but she's stable. She's asking for you. The relief nearly took him to his knees. He found her in a recovery room, pale and exhausted, tubes and monitors attached to her arms. But her eyes were open, and when she saw him, saw the baby in his arms, she smiled. "You stayed," she whispered. "Always." He settled onto the bed beside her, carefully transferring their daughter into her arms. "Look at her, Imani. Look at what we made." The baby blinked up at them with unfocused eyes, her tiny hand curling around Imani's finger. "She needs a name," Imani said. "We never decided." Seo-jun hesitated. "I was thinking, Jihi." Imani looked up at him, surprised. "Your mother's name?" "My mother is difficult, cold, terrifying." A small smile crossed his face. but she has also survived things that would have destroyed lesser women. She built an empire from ashes. She protected her children with everything she had, even when that protection looked like cruelty. I want our daughter to have that strength, to carry that legacy but make it softer. Imani looked down at the baby, at little Jihi, who was already falling asleep against her chest. Jihi, she repeated. I like it. The door opened, and the elder Jihi stepped inside. She looked different today. Smaller, somehow the sharp edges softened by something Imani couldn't name. Her eyes went to the baby, and for a moment her composure cracked. She's beautiful, Jihi said quietly. She is. Seo-jun rose to meet his mother. I've named her after you. If you'll allow it. Something passed between them, old wounds, old anger, the weight of years spent hurting each other. And then Jihi reached up and touched her son's face, the first gentle gesture Imani had ever seen from her. You've changed, Jihi said. She's changed you. She's saved me, Seo-jun corrected. Both of them have. Jihi looked at Imani then, really looked, for the first time without hostility or suspicion. Welcome to the family, she said. Truly this time. I will try to be worthy of the honor. It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. Later, when the visitors had gone, and the baby was sleeping in her bassinet, and the world outside was settling into dusk, Imani lay in Seo-jun's arms and let herself believe that they might actually make it. What happens now? She asked. Now. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Now we rebuild. The syndicate, this family, everything. But we do it differently. Softer. Better. We build a world our daughter can be proud to inherit. That sounds like a lot of work. It will be. His arms tightened around her. But I've got you. And you're the bravest person I know. Imani smiled against his chest. Outside the window, the mountains stood sentinel against the fading light, ancient and unchanging. But inside this room, everything had changed. She had come to Korea as a prisoner, a liability, a problem to be managed. She was leaving as an empress. And this was only the beginning. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.